If someone had told me that a man like my father, Alhaji Musa, the billionaire, the great man of Lagos, would one day eat dust, I would have fought that person to my last breath. But life, my friend, has no manual. It can turn even the strongest lion into a whisper of its old self. My name is Ahmad Musa, and this story is not something I am proud to tell. But if I keep quiet, others may walk into the same darkness that swallowed my family. So, listen carefully. Before everything went wrong, my father was one of the most respected men in Nigeria. Everybody knew Alhaji Musa of Lagos. He owned hotels, airlines, oil companies, and houses in and outside the country. People used to say, if Musa touches it, it turns to gold. He was not just rich, he was powerful. Ministers called him for advice. Journalists wanted his story. Even people from abroad came to shake his hand. My father loved to say, money is a servant, only poor people fear it. And we, his family, lived like royalty. I remember how his cars used to line up in front of our mansion. Long black cars that shone like mirrors. At night, soft music played from the balcony, and my mother would sit with us, smiling while Baba spoke about new projects. Life was sweet. The sun was still shining. But every sunrise hides a sunset. It started when a real estate agent told Baba about a large property in Gwarimpa, a huge estate that had been empty for many years. They said it once belonged to powerful people in the 1990s, but after the death of a former head of state, everyone who lived there moved out. Nobody ever moved back. Some said the place was haunted. Others said the ground itself had a secret. My father laughed when he heard that part. Haunted, he said, waving his hand. That's poor man's talk. Fear is for those who don't understand success. My mother was not so sure. Musa, she said one evening, there are some things you don't buy with money. That estate has a story. Baba smiled. Every land has a story, Amina. But stories don't pay bills. I'll turn that forgotten estate into a new city. And that was how it began. Within weeks, Baba's people went there to inspect the place. It was wide, long roads, empty houses covered in dust, tall grass waving in the wind. Even the birds flew in circles and refused to land. The air felt heavy, but Baba didn't see that. All he saw was opportunity. He bought it. Every inch. When the news spread, people called him brave. Some called him foolish. But Baba enjoyed the attention. They laughed when I built my first hotel, he said. Now they beg me for rooms. He began renovation immediately. He called it New Gwarimpa City. Workers cleared the land, painters came, engineers rebuilt the fences. Baba planned to move us into the biggest house in the estate, a mansion that once belonged to a general. The day we moved in, I remember the sun shone so bright that the walls almost glowed. My mother whispered, "May this house bring peace." The compound was so large you could get tired walking around it. The gate was strong iron, the doors made of shining wood. Baba looked at me and said, "Ahmad, this is the future. Someday, all this will be yours." I believed him. For the first few months, everything looked perfect. Workers finished the roads. Guests came to celebrate the grand opening. My father smiled again, full of energy. But little by little, small things started to happen, things we couldn't explain. It started with the night noises. Sometimes we would hear footsteps in the hallway, slow and heavy, even when everyone was asleep. The maid said maybe it was the wind. But we had no open windows. Then came the lights, flickering, switching on and off by themselves. Baba said it was a wiring problem. But after the electrician fixed everything twice, the lights still danced like candles in the storm. One night my mother woke up screaming. She said she heard a voice calling her name from the kitchen. When Baba rushed there, no one was inside. Only the smell of something burning, though the fire was off. Still, he refused to believe anything was wrong. "Fear is weakness," he said. "Don't let small noises scare you." But fear was already moving in with us. A month later, Baba lost one of his biggest business deals. A contract he had chased for years suddenly disappeared. His partners changed their minds for no reason. That day, I saw him sit quietly for the first time, holding his head in his hands. "Strange," he said. It was almost done. The following week, something even stranger happened. Baba parked his favorite car, a black SUV, inside the compound at night. The next morning it was gone. Everyone thought it was stolen. Police were called, but by afternoon, the same car was found far away, in another city, dusty and abandoned. No one could explain how. "Someone is playing tricks," Baba said, but his voice was not as strong as before. My mother wanted us to leave the estate. "Please, Musa," she said softly one evening, "let's go back to our old house. Sell this place if you must." "Sell it to who?" he asked. "You know people think it's haunted. Nobody will buy it. And I'm not running away because of stories." He laughed again, but this time it didn't sound like the laughter of the man I once knew. As the weeks went by, the house grew colder. The workers began to quit. They said they saw shadows moving between rooms, or heard whispers near the gate. At night, the generator would stop on its own, and no one dared go outside to restart it. I tried to stay brave, but even I could feel it, something in that house watching us, waiting. Sometimes I would catch my father staring into empty space, his eyes lost. One night I asked, "Baba, are you okay?" He smiled weakly. "Yes, Ahmad. I'm fine. Just tired." But I knew he was not fine. The light in his eyes, the one that made him look like he could conquer the world, was slowly dying. And that was when the real darkness began. The night after Baba told me he was just tired, I woke up to a sound I will never forget, a woman crying softly in the hallway. It was around 2 a.m. The house was silent except for that voice. It sounded close, like someone standing right outside my door. At first I thought it was my mother, maybe praying or in pain. I called out, "Mama." The crying stopped. When I opened the door, no one was there. The hallway was empty, but I could still feel someone's presence, like the air itself was watching me. From that night things got worse. Every morning my mother looked more tired. The dark circles under her eyes grew deeper. She said she heard people whispering in the walls. The maids had already left, one after another. Only 2 remained, and they begged my father to let them sleep outside in the staff quarters. My father didn't listen. He had changed. The once cheerful man who used to sing in his car now walked with heavy steps, always lost in thought. Sometimes he sat in the living room, staring at nothing. His phone would ring for hours, but he wouldn't answer. One day, I heard him shouting at the driver. "Who took my briefcase?" he yelled. The driver said he didn't know. But the strange thing was this. The briefcase was found later that night in the garden, buried halfway in the soil, like someone tried to hide it. Baba stopped eating with us. He stayed in his office most of the time, surrounded by files, as if he was trying to fix something that refused to be fixed. A few weeks later the fire happened. It started far away, at one of his oil refineries in Port Harcourt. News came that the place had burned down in the middle of the night. Many workers were injured, millions lost. As Baba was trying to handle that disaster, another fire started, this time at his airline headquarters in Lagos. The same day. When Baba heard the news, he fainted. He was rushed to the hospital. I remember the silence in the car as we drove behind the ambulance. My mother held his hand and kept whispering prayers, her tears falling silently. At the hospital, the doctor said his body was fine, but he wouldn't wake up for 2 days. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at me and said something strange. "Ahmad," he whispered, "maybe this land is angry." That was the first time I saw fear in my father's eyes. When we returned home, the house felt colder than ever. The air smelled like dust and something rotten. Even the birds that used to sing in the trees were gone. My mother wanted to take us to her sister's place for a while, but Baba refused again. "If we leave now," he said, "people will laugh. They will say I failed." That night my younger sister Zainab woke up screaming. We all rushed into her room. She said she saw a man sitting at the foot of her bed, an old man in white, staring at her with empty eyes. Baba shouted at her. "You're dreaming. Enough of these stories." But Zainab swore she was not dreaming. She pointed to the floor and said, "He was right there." The next day she refused to eat. She stayed in bed, shaking, whispering to herself. My mother called a pastor, and when he came, he walked through the house, praying and sprinkling water. After he left, things were quiet for 2 days. Then the noises returned, louder this time. Doors slammed on their own. Windows rattled even when there was no wind. And at night the crying woman came back, her voice echoing through the halls. One evening I sat with Baba in the living room. The power had gone out again. He looked at me and said, "Do you think the things people said about this place are true?" I didn't know what to say. I was only 17, but I had seen enough to know something was wrong. "Maybe we should ask questions, Baba," I said quietly. "Find out what happened here before." He looked at me for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will ask." But tomorrow never came. That same night, a loud crash woke us. My mother screamed. We ran to the sitting room and saw one of the giant chandeliers on the floor, shattered into 1,000 pieces. No one had touched it. And then we heard footsteps upstairs, heavy and fast. But when we looked up the staircase, there was no one. For the first time, Baba prayed out loud. His voice shook. My mother cried beside him. 2 days later, Baba called some elders from the nearby community. They were old men who knew stories of the land. When they arrived, they refused to enter the main house. One of them, a man with gray hair and a walking stick, said, "This land is not for living. It was once a resting ground." Baba frowned. "A resting ground for who?" The man looked at him. "For the forgotten ones. Those who died without names. When the first buildings were raised here, their bones were moved, but their spirits remained. They do not like to be disturbed." My father went silent. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what the old man said. A resting ground. I remembered the strange smell in the garden, the voices, the cold air. It all made sense, but it was already too late. Because the next tragedy came quickly. 3 days later, my sister Zainab fell sick. The doctor said it was fever, but no medicine worked. She kept talking in her sleep, saying, "He's calling me." My mother prayed every hour, but on the 7th day, Zainab took her last breath. The house went quiet. Even the shadows seemed to stop moving that night. I will never forget how Baba stood by her bed, his hands shaking. The great man who once spoke with presidents now looked like a child lost in the rain. He didn't say a word. He just walked out of the room and didn't come back until morning. The next day, he told us we were leaving the estate for good. But it was already too late. We were supposed to leave the next morning. My father had already called for trucks to move our things. My mother looked relieved for the first time in months. I thought maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was ending. But by dawn everything changed again. The driver who was meant to take us out of the estate never arrived. His phone was switched off. The gate guard we had hired disappeared without a word. When Baba tried to open the gate himself, the padlock refused to turn, even though he had the right key. It was as if the house itself didn't want us to go. My mother began to cry quietly. "Musa," she said, "this place will not let us go unless we ask for mercy." Baba said nothing. He just sat on the steps, staring at the ground. That was when I noticed something strange. The flowers near the compound fence, the ones Mama loved, had all turned brown overnight, as if fire had touched them. The air smelled of smoke, though there was no fire anywhere. By afternoon, Baba finally managed to open the gate, but as we started loading the truck, a heavy storm began suddenly, without warning. The sky turned dark like evening. Thunder roared. The driver said he couldn't move the truck in that weather. So we waited. That night the storm stopped, but the road was flooded. The driver promised to come early in the morning. That was the night the house truly woke up. I was in my room packing my things when I heard my younger sister, Miriam, singing softly in the hallway. Her voice was sweet, but the song was strange. I had never heard it before. "Miriam," I called out, "where did you learn that song?" She didn't answer. She just kept singing, walking slowly toward the kitchen. I followed her, but when I reached there, she wasn't inside. The singing continued from the backyard. When I opened the back door, the cold hit me like a slap. I stepped out and froze. Miriam was standing in the garden, barefoot, looking at something on the ground. Her eyes were blank, her lips moving without sound now. "Miriam!" I shouted, running to her. But before I could reach her, she collapsed. We carried her inside. Baba called the family doctor, who rushed over within an hour. He said it was exhaustion, but I knew it wasn't. Her body was ice cold, even though the room was warm. She never woke up again. That night broke my father completely. He sat by her bedside until morning, whispering prayers, refusing to eat or sleep. When the burial was done, he didn't go back to the house. He stayed outside under the mango tree, his face hard and empty. That evening I sat beside him and asked, "Baba, what did we do wrong?" He sighed deeply. "Maybe I should have listened," he said. "People warned me. The land warned me. But I was too proud to hear." For the first time I saw tears in his eyes. 2 days later my school overseas sent an email. I had been expelled. They said my last assignment was copied, even though I hadn't submitted anything yet. I tried to explain, but they said the decision was final. I showed Baba the message. He just looked at it and said, "The curse has reached even you." My mother could no longer stay in the house. She went to live with her cousin in town. Baba and I remained because he said he couldn't abandon what he built. But he was no longer the man I knew. He stopped dressing well. He stopped going to his office. Sometimes I would find him talking to himself in empty rooms. Other times I would hear him shouting, "Leave me alone." But when I ran to him, he was alone. One night, around midnight, I found him in the living room, sitting in total darkness. The lights were off, yet he sat there, staring at the window. "Baba," I whispered. He didn't answer. When I got closer, he turned to me slowly and said, "Ahmad, they are here." "Who?" I asked. He pointed toward the window. "The ones who built this place before us. They never left. They said I took what wasn't mine." I wanted to believe it was just his grief, but then I heard it too. A soft tapping sound on the glass like fingers knocking. When I looked, I saw nothing, but my body froze. The air was heavy. That night I couldn't sleep. At dawn, Baba packed a small bag and said he was going to the village of one of the elders who had spoken to him earlier. "He will tell me what to do," he said. "Maybe I can make peace with this land." He left before sunrise. He never came back. They said his car was found near a broken bridge, but there was no body inside. The police searched for weeks, but nothing. It was as if the road swallowed him whole. After that, the house was truly empty. My mother refused to return. I stayed for 1 more week, hoping Baba would walk back through the gate one day. But all I got were the same voices, the same footsteps, and the same crying woman at night. One evening, as I packed the last of my clothes, I walked through the living room one final time. The air felt heavy and cold, but I didn't care anymore. I was done. Then as I reached for the door, the lights flickered one last time, and I heard a whisper behind me, a deep voice that said, "We warned him." When I turned around, there was nothing there, just the empty chair where Baba used to sit. I left the house that night. I didn't look back. The night I left that house, I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. The moon was high, the road silent. My heart was heavier than my bag. I walked until I reached the main road. I flagged down a passing truck and asked for a ride. The driver looked at me with pity and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed, but I couldn't. He dropped me off at a small town not far from Abuja. My mother was there, staying with her cousin. When she saw me at the door, she cried so hard I thought her heart would break again. We held each other for a long time without speaking. For the next few weeks we lived quietly. She refused to talk about the estate, and I didn't push her. But one evening she called me into her room. She opened an old envelope and took out a newspaper clipping. It was dated many years ago, long before I was born. "Ahmad," she said, "you need to see this." The headline read, "Abandoned Estate After Mysterious Deaths of Military Families." I looked closer. It was about Gorimpa Estate. The story said the land had once belonged to an old village before it was forcefully taken by soldiers during the military era. The villagers were pushed out without compensation. Some refused to leave and vanished. The few who survived swore the land would never rest. Baba never knew this part. He only saw the profit, not the pain buried beneath it. For a long time I sat there holding the paper, feeling my hands shake. I realized the truth. It wasn't just a haunted house. It was a land that carried grief, injustice, and forgotten tears. My father had bought cursed ground. And somehow we all paid the price. A few months later, I went back to the estate. Not to stay, I just needed closure. The gate was still standing, but the paint had peeled off. Grass had grown tall around the fence. The house looked older, as if decades had passed, though it had been less than a year. I stood there in silence. The air felt cold again, but this time I wasn't afraid. I whispered, "Baba, I came back. I know now." A soft wind passed through the trees, almost like a sigh. Then something strange happened. The padlock that had sealed the gate all that time clicked open by itself. I didn't enter, but I understood. Maybe it was the house's way of saying goodbye. I picked a small stone from the ground, just one, and carried it with me as a reminder. Not everything you own truly belongs to you. Some things carry stories too heavy for money to buy. 2 years later, I graduated from a new school abroad. It wasn't easy. We had nothing left, but I worked small jobs and kept going. My mother sold some jewelry to support me. Sometimes at night I would dream of Baba sitting in his chair, smiling. Other nights, I would hear the storm again and wake up shaking. But I always remembered his last words. Maybe I should have listened. Now, whenever I see someone rushing to buy land or move into a house because it looks cheap or grand, I stop them and say, "Ask questions. Ask again and again. Because not every land is empty. And not every house welcomes you." They usually laugh, but I just smile. I've lived the story they only hear about. A few months ago, I met an old man at the mosque in Lagos. He looked familiar, so I greeted him. When I mentioned my name, his face changed. "Ahmad Musa," he repeated. "You are the son of Alhaji Musa of Gorimpa?" "Yes, sir," I said carefully. He nodded slowly. "Your father came to me once. He wanted to know how to cleanse that land. But I told him it was not cleansing it needed. It was forgiveness. The spirits of that soil only wanted peace." He sighed and said quietly, "Your father was a good man, but pride deafened his ears. Still, I believe he found peace at last." I thanked him and left, but those words stayed with me. That night, as I lay on my bed, I realized something powerful. Sometimes we think the dead haunt us. But sometimes it's our own choices that do. I still carry my father's photo in my wallet. Not to mourn him, but to remember the lesson the wind left behind. That no matter how rich, powerful, or wise we think we are never greater than the truth buried beneath our feet. So, if you ever plan to move into a new house, don't just ask how many rooms it has or how strong the roof is. Ask about its past. Ask who lived there before. Ask what the land remembers. Because sometimes the walls have more memory than the people who built them. And some memories never sleep.